Getting married is the most legally significant thing you're ever going to do other than dying. We don't ever grab people and say, okay, before you do this huge legally significant thing.
In 2 years, you're going to look at each other and say, you again.
I look at these people's social media and it's like, you know, greatest husband ever, #blessed. And they were in my office the day before for a consult. If aliens came down and looked at us, they would think the primary presenting problem of our time is erectile dysfunction. Love is grand, divorce is 100 grand. So,
Do you have that on your wall?
I do actually.
Joining me for a special segment that we're calling Divorce Discourse in this lovely little podcast we're having today is a best-selling author, top New York divorce attorney, and viral sensation who's giving us his unfiltered takes on marriage. Take a look.
Marriage is overwhelmingly unsuccessful. It is way more dangerous than skydiving. Yes, you die from the skydiving, but the chances of a catastrophic skydiving incident is like 0.0003, and one where you die is 0.00001. It's like very limited, the chances of dying from skydiving.
Do more people die from marriage or skydiving?
Well, I think more people wish they were dead from marriage than skydiving.
So welcome to the studio, James Sexton. Hi, James.
Hey, Joy. It's great to be here.
You say in the clip that skydiving is less dangerous than marriage, or?
In terms of the percentages of danger involved in it, I mean, obviously, you know, the catastrophic failure of skydiving is probably a lot worse than the catastrophic failure of a marriage. But when you look at its popularity relative to the danger it presents, I mean, marriage is a dangerous thing.
Why? Why do you say that?
Well, I mean, if 56% of marriages end in divorce, and we assume that, another 5, 10, 20% stay together for the kids or religious reasons or other purposes.
Wow, now we're up to 75%.
Right.
Almost,
I mean, to put that in perspective, like it's at least a dangerous enough of an activity that if someone says to you, I'm getting married, it might be reasonable to go, really, why? Like,
I've asked that question many times.
Have you really? See, you can get away with that though. Like
why?
because you're pretty blunt talking, you know. And if you say to somebody like, "Oh, really? Why?"
I know.
You know, people are. Plus, you know, you wrote a play about it, so I mean, it's going to be something that comes into the discourse, you know.
Well, I got married very young, very young. I was like 21 or 2, something like that.
Sure.
And he was the same. We were at college.
Yeah.
And it didn't last. It doesn't last.
Yeah.
But then when we got divorced, I met another guy, my present husband, but I didn't want to live with him. I met him in 1982 and we got married in 2011. And we weren't even living together until maybe 2001.
Yeah.
Because I was skittish about it.
Sure.
I was aware of the danger.
Yeah.
And so I kept it like that.
Yeah, and that's what's surprising to me is, you know, we were talking before about the fact that, you know, the divorce rate is as high as it is, but the statistic I find even more shocking is that 86% of people who get divorced in the United States remarry within 5 years.
See, what is that? That hope springs eternal.
Yeah, I mean, marriage is to some degree the triumph of faith over reason, you know. And
what is it about marriage that people are attracted to then?
I mean, it's a great question, and asking a divorce lawyer it, I don't know that I know the answer.
Maybe people don't like to be alone.
I think definitely people don't like to be alone. I think there's something to the permutation of like a pair bond. I mean, look, I believe in relationships. I don't know that I'm even against marriage, but I think marriage is like the lottery. Like you're probably not going to win. But if you win, what you win is so good that buy a ticket, like give it a shot.
But only 25% win according to your statistics.
Yeah, it's a really low number. But again, if what you win is so good, and if you can kind of control the downside, which is why I'm a big fan of prenups, because there tends to be this sense, like every marriage has a prenup. It's either one written by the government, or it's one written by these two people who claim to love each other more than the other 8 billion other options in the world. So to me, who should write the rule set of the marriage? The state? And then they can change it. I mean, look, in our current political climate, I think left and right can both agree that putting the government in charge of things isn't always a great idea.
Well, certainly not that.
Right. Like I've never walked into the DMV and went, oh, these people should be in charge of everything. Like we should definitely put them in charge of my marriage. So I think there's value in two people saying, what are the rules that are govern our marriage? What do we expect from each other? What do we owe each other? And having an honest conversation.
All right. As a lawyer, you must do a lot of prenups.
Yeah. I mean, prenups have become increasingly popular because I think that
even with people who have no money?
Absolutely. It's actually the best time to have one because really, like I've said, every marriage has a prenup. It's just one written by the government or one written by these two people.
Right.
But I mean, some of the stuff people put into prenups, one of the stories I've told before is that I actually had a couple that for every 10 pounds that the wife gained during the marriage, she would forfeit $10,000 a month in alimony in the event that they divorced.
Why the guy wanted that?
Yeah, the guy wanted that in there because
What if he got fat?
there was nothing in there about that
well.
because he was already fat and
I
she was
see.
very beautiful, and it was like a kind of there. Look, it was kind of boorish, but there was also an honesty to it. He was saying, look, this is what I like about you. And she was saying, this is what I like about you. He was saying, I like that you're beautiful. And she was saying, I like that you have money. So they were saying, well, if you give it up, then I'm going to give it up.
Oh, so he was fat with money.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
I mean, and he was short and fat. He was like 6'5" when he was standing on his wallet. But the rest of the time, he was a little tiny guy.
And
she was gorgeous.
Yeah, so
She was
that's the
absolutely
deal
gorgeous.
they made.
That was the deal they made. And it was actually when they divorced, she tried to set aside that portion of the prenup. And the court actually said, I don't know why you married this guy. This is an insane provision, but we're going to uphold it because you're adults and you entered into a contract.
So how much did she gain?
She had gained, I think, like 15 pounds, something like that.
All right, she didn't lose that much.
No, I actually thought to myself, you know, what she should have done is like what like wrestlers and boxers do, which is like sit in the sauna before the weigh-in, you know, because there'd have to be like a weigh-in.
Well, go on
and figure
Ozempic.
out-
Just go on Ozempic.
Exactly, or right before the divorce actually happens. But no, I mean, prenups are increasingly popular. You know, I'm involved in something called trustedprenup.com, which is basically like a way to democratize prenups. Just the way that therapy got democratized by the internet and suddenly people could go online and you could find a therapist, even if there wasn't one in your geographic area. Like prenups have been something that people mistakenly think is for the elite. And now what we're really trying to do with Trusted Prenup is create a situation where people have access to prenups at a reasonable price that create a rule set that they can then base their financial decisions on during the marriage.
And do it while you're still in love.
100%.
It's like making a will before you're sick.
Yes.
So you've been a divorce attorney for 25 years.
Yeah.
And you've dealt with more than 1,000 divorce cases. Now, I wrote a play about divorce.
Yes.
It's called My First Ex-Husband. It's based on interviews I did with real women. I added and subtracted and changed the names, and et cetera, so that nobody knew who they were.
Yeah. And I had the pleasure of seeing it. And I will tell you very candidly, because I know you appreciate candor, I was expecting to hate it.
Why?
Like I went in with it. Well, you know, there's an old joke like, why don't cannibals eat divorced women? Because they're bitter. You know, and I think that when people normally do popular media about divorce, it's really hard to do it right. Yeah. Because it's really easy to do it in a way that's misogynist or misandrist or that oversimplifies things. And it's just like treats dandruff with decapitation. Like it's just, you know, I love this person, now I hate this person.
Right.
So I went in thinking, okay, I'm a divorce lawyer. I'm coming out of the office, so I'm wearing my lawyer costume.
Right.
And, you know, I'm known as a divorce lawyer in New York. So I'm going into this, I'm thinking I'm going to be the only guy there. It's going to be a bunch of, I wasn't.
No.
And it's going to be really, really like mean-spirited or misogynist.
But it's the opposite.
It was the total opposite.
Right.
I loved it.
Thank you.
And I thought you managed to do something that it's really hard to do, and that is catch the entire, you know, like array of emotions that you have when a marriage ends.
I was just thinking about my first marriage today.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about all of the nice things about it for some reason. It's a long time ago.
Well, memory is kind. I mean, you know, we tend to like remember things with a little bit more of a rosy hue, but I just thought you captured in it. And of course, you know, the actors do such a phenomenal job.
They are
because,
great.
You know, you got 4 people telling 8 stories.
Right.
And the first time they get up and they tell the first story, I go, okay, now I know what this person sounds like. And then they get up for the next one and they're a totally different person.
Right. What's the most crazy story you ever dealt with? A divorce?
I mean, I've dealt with, you know, in 25 years of practicing.
Because maybe I could use it.
You know, I mean, there's a lot. I have a lot of, I actually thought to myself while I was watching, I was like, oh, I have so many people I'd love Joy to meet because some of the stories are so fascinating.
You know what? I would like to find a couple who are politically on opposite ends,
Yeah.
You know, like one is a Trump lover and the
Yeah.
other one hates him.
Well, I have to
and
tell you,
how do they
that's-
get along?
Well, there's a lot of divorces happening in the current political
Really?
zeitgeist. Oh, yeah. I've had a lot of people that say, like, yeah, my spouse got radicalized. You know, radicalized by MSNBC or radicalized by Fox News or by, by Newsmax. And,
Right.
people kind of go down their political rabbit hole. There were, for this last election and even in 2016, but this last one much more so, such a polarization and such differing worldviews that, yeah, it strained a lot of marriages. And there was a lot of like gender line stuff where, like men felt like, there was a lot of like right wing stuff being geared directly at men.
Yeah.
And it caused a lot of tension in already challenged marriages. So I've had people who came in and said, yeah, my spouse went absolutely nuts. They went
And
so
then did they
far
get divorced?
right.
And they got divorced.
Yeah, I mean, they're in my office.
Based on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Well, based is that, look, no single raindrop's responsible for the flood, but
Yeah.
like, was that the thing that made it go? Because I've always said, like, people fall in love fast, but they fall out of love the way they go bankrupt, which is like very slowly and then all at once.
That's true.
And that's like some moment, where they
I always
fall
say
out of
that,
love.
I always say that there's always a lot of divorces, not all, obviously. There's always a third party involved.
Sure.
You agree with that?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's family members. Sometimes it's.
No, I'm talking about a cheating guy.
Well, cheating.
spouse.
I've always found after 25 years of doing this that I'm not sure if the infidelity is a symptom or the underlying illness. Like
Mostly
people come
it's
in,
probably a symptom.
Yeah, because people
would
come
think.
in and they'll say,
Yeah.
oh, we're getting divorced because you're sleeping with his secretary. And then you talk to him, because I represent, the cheater and the cheated on. I represent the person with a substance use issue and the person married to a person. So I've been on both sides, the accuser and the accused.
Uh-huh.
And you kind of start to figure out, doing this for a living and putting yourself in these people's heads and listening to their stories, that it's not as easy as that there's good guys and bad guys and that's it.
No,
that
that's
there's
right.
a
Well, that's
lot
why I
of
say you have to take the blame.
nuance. Yeah.
But this is interesting. You say that when a woman cheats, a man wants to know, did you have sex?
Yeah.
And when a man cheats, the woman wants to know, are you in love?
I think we'd all agree there's a difference between like a dalliance or someone just doing something stupid or hooking up with someone and it's purely physical and saying, I found this person and they're my soulmate and I'm leaving you because I'm going to pursue this person. And I think that's a meaningful distinction.
Yes.
Because if you said, would you prefer that your spouse made out with another person or that they were texting with another person and sharing their most like intimate emotional feelings over a 6-month period? Like one of those feels like way more intimate than kissing somebody.
Well, that's what Rabbi Shmuley says when he talks about kosher sex and how that is cheating in a certain way, even though you're not in bed with them.
Yeah, and it feels like.
But what does it mean?
more of
I
a
know you're not a
betrayal.
shrink, but what is it with men who just have to go and find all these women to have sex with, and then the next, and they pay for it a lot of time, and the next while they're married? What is that about?
I don't claim to know the answer to that. What I'll say is I spent a lot of time with those men, and I've spent a lot of time with their spouses, and I think they don't often understand what it is. And it's like a dog chasing a car; like they wouldn't know what to do with it when they got it.
They know what to do with it.
Well, they know what to do with it, but the truth is that how much, like, is it really worth what you just put up on the table as your bet? Like,
I don't know that they
can't
think of it. I
imagine.
don't think that they think of it that way. I think that
they definitely
it's a
don't think of
compulsion.
it that way.
It seems,
and how do they not think of it in a real way? How do they not think, wow, like I'm about to risk a tremendous amount right now? And I think
they think they're not going to get caught.
Well, some of it is hormonal and biological. Look, I once said I represented a guy. He was 93 years old.
Yeah.
And he was getting divorced from his wife of 60-something years.
At 93?
Yes.
He
And
wanted or she did?
He did, because he had a younger girlfriend he was cheating on.
She
her
was
with.
83?
She was in her 60s.
Oh.
As a human being and as a man, I actually thought, oh my God, I'm going to be chained to an idiot forever. Like, I'm going to be, like, I thought when I was 93, I would stop thinking with my penis. That a beautiful woman would walk by and I would just go, oh, there's a human being. And I wouldn't give it any thought.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this guy's in his 90s and he's still making terrible decisions based on what his penis wants.
The nursing homes are filled with older people
That's what I've
jumping
heard.
into beds with each other.
Well, great divorce is like a phenomenon.
Tell
like
me
the
about
number
that.
the number of people who are, because obviously like longevity is, expanding and people don't, people aren't dying at the ages they used to die. People are living long lives, and certainly there's a million medications for erectile erectile dysfunction
I
now.
know.
So people
Jeez,
are,
how?
running, like if aliens came down and looked at us, they would think the primary presenting problem of our time
Was
is
erectile
erectile dysfunction.
dysfunction,
Like
yeah.
they would be absolutely certain that the most important thing,
Or
we
wait,
spend more
or-
money turning an erect 80-year-old into an erect 85-year-old than we do turning a semi-literate 7-year-old into a literate 8-year-old. So I think it's kind of shocking, but I mean, I think that this is a primary drive for a lot of us, and I understand why it's become, something that we stay fixated on. The question is why do we not get better at it? Why do we not get better at making good choices in relationships? And I don't claim to know the answer to that.
Well, I mean, people need therapy. That's why.
Yeah, and I think
we're all out there reproducing our parents' marriages and reproducing our childhoods. It's like childhood is a kind of a rehearsal for adulthood in a way.
Yeah.
So you look back on that and you say, oh, I see why I'm attracted to that type of man.
Yeah, but even looking at our parents' marriages, the environment that they were living in is so different that we have, the entire sum total of all human wisdom on our phone, in our hand.
Yeah.
Like every song that's ever been recorded, we could listen to instantaneously. Like a world where, if you think about how many women my great-grandfather interacted with on a daily basis, it was a pretty small number. Whereas if I go on Instagram for 5 minutes or TikTok, I can interact with 100 beautiful women. Just, there's a chapter in my book called If We Were Going to Build an Infidelity Generating Machine, it would be called Facebook. I would probably change that now to TikTok or Instagram. But, the truth is, we're just interacting with, potential romantic partners in a way we never did before. No other generation did.
Yeah, that's true. Too many choices.
Way too many choices.
Some shrinks say that everybody marries their mother. What do you think of that?
I think we either marry the parent we had challenges with or the parent that we were most closely aligned with.
Well, I think it's more of an unconscious thing, don't you?
Yeah, probably. I think most of our drives, I say in my book that I think that, our primary problem with marriage is that we don't know what we want and we don't know how to express what we want. I think the most dangerous lies are the ones we tell ourselves.
Yeah.
And because we don't even know we're lying when
Right.
we're saying to our spouse, no, I'm good, I'm fine. Or, I'm happy. When in fact, we're not being honest with ourselves about what's happy, unhappy.
Well, that brings me to this question because a lot of these people online, they're always posting about how madly in love they are with each other.
So true.
How often are they overcompensating for the fact that they're in the 75 percentile?
I got to tell you, Joy, I have people, because I represent people in entertainment, I represent athletes, I represent C-suite executives. I look at these people's social media and it's like, greatest husband ever, #blessed. And they were in my office the day before for a consult. I watch interviews where the person says, we're getting married, but we don't have a prenup. I'm like, yes, you do. I wrote it. It's in the safe in my office.
So they're lying.
But they're just lying. And the problem is we're all comparing ourselves to this curated greatest hits that people are posting while we live our gag reel. While we live our weird life that is full of real challenges, and we're comparing ourselves to these other people's lives and going, oh my God, my life doesn't look like that. Their life doesn't look like that. They're airbrushed, they're filtered, they're only showing you the best parts. So I think that's a huge
bunch of
piece of our
baloney.
dissatisfaction.
It's a bunch of baloney.
Absolutely.
Here's another idea. According to a report from divorce.com, see, couples are 2 to 3 more times more likely to get divorced if the woman is the breadwinner of the family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. What I'll say is I've seen a lot of divorces where a man loses his job and loses his status as the breadwinner.
Yeah.
And that damages the relationship. It damages his self-esteem. It damages her perception of him, his spouse's perception of him as being like a successful person.
Yeah.
So I could see that. I think a lot has changed in our society, much for the better, when it comes to the nature of our gender roles and how, men and women conduct themselves in the workplace and, who takes care of children and how we delegate and share responsibilities. Some of that stuff has really changed. But fundamentally, there are still some things that I think made marriages really work when it was much clearer. Okay, this is my job. This is your job. Well, I mean, I think it made it
nuclear
cleaner.
family.
I don't think it was good. It had a lot of second order real issues with it. I think that it was ultimately it was very difficult for women. It limited the choices women had in front of them.
Yeah.
But I do think we have to at least talk about when things change. We have to say, hey, we're getting married. What do you expect from me? Like how should we share some of these responsibilities? And if we feel it's getting lopsided or one of us feels like we're being shortchanged, how do we have that conversation without it turning into a fight or hearing it defensively?
Well, you'd have to get men to talk more because they don't tell you what's bothering you them a lot of times.
See, I've never had that problem. I have the opposite, which is, they're like, it's hard to even tell what's important. I talk so much.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think men are not encouraged to have an emotional vocabulary.
I know. You heard me in the opening of my show where I say I talk to men. They gave me one-word answers.
Yep.
So,
that actually was the first giant laugh. It's in the first 30 seconds of the show. But it's everyone in there could relate to that and say, oh yeah, true. If you ask most men about their divorce, they go like, yeah, she was terrible.
Yeah, right.
Whereas women will sit down and talk to you for
stories
about it. Yeah, I have to tell my female clients sometimes, I'm like, this is $850 an hour. Like, you might want to keep this a little shorter.
You're expensive.
I like to think I'm worth it.
You're expensive. Wow.
Yeah. Divorce, listen, love is grand. Divorce is $100,000. So,
Do you have that on your wall?
I do, actually.
All of my friends, let me think, one, two, a couple of them are dead now. They made more money than their husbands.
Yeah.
I make more money than my husband.
Yeah.
My husband is a retired school teacher.
Yep.
So I think that change in the roles may have disrupted people, but I think that men are starting to say, hey, I got it good.
Yeah.
She's the one who's going out there and breaking her buns.
That's
and
true.
I'm home watching Law and Order reruns.
That's true, but I will tell you a place where it blows up is, the last remaining feminist taboo is having to pay alimony to your ex-husband. Because I've represented a lot of very successful women.
That's annoying.
And when you tell them
alimony is
you have
annoying.
to pay alimony to this person. But there's something about the surgeon or the CEO who marries the super hot yoga teacher that people kind of go yeah, you're going to have to pay, man. What did you expect?
Right.
But when you tell a woman who's a, C-suite executive or an entertainer, oh yeah, you married that musician who's kind of in a band and has the oops, I didn't know I was sexy stubble and the long hair. And he makes no money, but you thought he's cool. Yeah, you got to pay him alimony. They go, whoa, he's a man. He has a strong back. Why do I have to pay for him? And it's something that.
Well, that's something that needs to evolve. According to the YouGov poll, 1/3 of Americans describe their ideal relationship as something other than complete monogamy.
Interesting.
Have you seen non-monogamous relationships? This reminds me of Jean-Paul Sartre and Simone de Beauvoir, a famous couple.
Sure.
Sartre, one of the great thinkers of the 20th century, and she also a great thinker. I think she wrote something called The Feminine Mystique, right? Or was that Betty Friedan?
That's Betty Friedan.
Right.
Yeah.
I forget the name of her book.
Yeah.
Somebody
I know
find
I
out.
read it. But
Simone de Beauvoir. See if you can find it. Anyway. I read, and then she had an affair with Nelson Aldrin, who was an American writer, and he was jealous. But they made a deal; they were going to have an open relationship.
Yeah.
She could screw around, he
Yeah.
could screw around. Because
Yeah.
he was the great philosopher, French philosopher, and he can't.
Well, the French find infidelity charming. Sometimes,
Well, yeah, but not really, because they, in the end of the day, they were still mad at each other for cheating on each other. So maybe monogamy is the only way you can do it.
Well, it's really interesting because there's everything. We're trying to Uber everything now. So I do see a lot of people that are.
I know what it was called. The second sex.
The second sex.
That's
yes,
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
going to say. I know I read it in college.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So there's this idea of what they call ethical non-monogamy, polyamory, those kinds of things. I'm the wrong person to comment on that because.
Why?
Well, because I see when it crashes and burns.
Yeah.
You come into a divorce lawyer's office because it didn't work out. So I see a lot of people that was the Hail Mary pass.
Yeah, so you're looking at the X-ray.
Right. So I'm looking at when it fell apart. I'm sure
Right.
there are plenty of people who never end up in a divorce lawyer's office that have. I do know I've had a lot of clients, particularly female clients, who have been married a long time. and their husband, and actually one of your characters in the play talks about how, he had affairs, but I was always like, whatever, as long as he comes home to me, that's what matters. Like we have a partnership, we have kids together. So there are people that kind of look at it like, I'm delegating something that I don't really feel like, praising him all day long and making him feel like he's handsome and sexy. That's not my job.
Yeah.
Like let somebody else deal with that. Just don't bring her around, our friends, and don't make a fool of me.
That's right.
And I think we see that a lot.
Yeah.
But in terms of like the real, like from the beginning, people saying, okay, we're going to be non-monogamous and we're going to not have that be part of our marriage. I haven't seen a lot of that be successful. But again, I'm sitting in a very unique seat as a divorce lawyer.
Maybe it doesn't work. Let's talk turkey here. Maybe it just doesn't work.
It might not.
As a friend of mine, Richard, used to say, monogamy is monotonous, but it's safe.
Sure.
It's safe, you don't have to go out there and get some STD, whatever. I mean,
well, I think you're always trading one set of problems for another, right?
Yeah.
Like even being married is trading one set of problems for another. What I always encourage people to do when you're thinking about almost any technology, including marriage, is what is the problem to which this is a solution, right? So like, what's the problem that marriage is a solution to? Because if you say it's loneliness, I don't think that's, like there's a lot of people that are lonely and married. If it's,
they say that the loneliest people are married women.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, it was single men, and then married women, and then the least lonely are single women.
But see, at least if you're a single man or single woman and you're lonely, it kind of makes sense because you're single, so you're like, I'm by myself and I'm lonely. Like it's the same reason why loneliness in New York is very odd, because it's so crowded and yet you feel so alone.
Of course.
So I think that makes it even like it amplifies the loneliness. I think it's the same concept, which is if you're married, there's a part of you that feels like, oh, I've got my person and I'll never feel alone. I'll never be alone. But when you're with someone and feeling that alone, that's like a special kind of hell,
Well, because you're looking at the person, they remind you of their very presence that you're alone because they're not relating to you. When you first meet somebody, you're running towards each other in slow motion. Yeah. There's all that. There's that period. What do they call it? There's a word to describe it. Yeah. And Helen Fisher, who is an anthropologist, she posits that people in that phase, it lasts about 2 years. Where you just can't wait to jump into bed with each other.
It's intoxicating.
But it has to do with biology and evolution in order for you to propagate the human race. But then that ends or peters out. And then what?
Right,
that's the problem. It's almost like a trick that's being played on people.
Do we ever have an honest conversation? Because I mean, think about it. Getting married is the most legally significant thing you're ever going to do other than dying, right? Like if you buy a condo, you got to fill out a HUD-1, a lead paint disclosure. You get 50 pounds of paperwork. You get married, you didn't get a pamphlet.
Right.
You didn't get any. You just did the most legally significant thing. You opted out of the title system. You no longer have control over your assets for the purposes of division.
Right.
Like so many things changed, and no one explained it to you. Most times, people learn about what happens legally to them when they got married is when they're in my office, and there are like the worst time to learn how to fight is when you're in a fight. We've put so much of that like honeymoon period. We don't ever grab people and say, okay, before you do this huge legally significant thing.
In 2 years, you're going to look at each other and say, you again.
Right. Give them like a waiting period, maybe. Like, you buy a gun, you should have a waiting period. Yeah. Like maybe with marriage, it's like, okay, you get engaged, you got to have a mandatory waiting period because you have to let that luster wear off and those pheromones wear off.
I always say that. You should wait at least 2 or 3 years before you actually get married.
Well, if you created barriers to entry and say, look, you can't just go get married. You have to finish a course. You have to take a test. You have to have a waiting period.
They should have that for parenting also.
Anything.
Nobody knows what they're doing.
Look, I adopted a dog from ACC. And they wanted a note from my 3rd grade English teacher. They wanted like a urine sample. They wanted to know everything about me. Whereas you get married, it's like, oh, yeah, go ahead, just sign the piece of paper and you're married. So I don't really know. Having kids, no license required. Just go and do it.
Right. So any idiot can have a baby.
Right. And then you're by the way really locked in. I mean, a lot of what I do is custody litigation. And when you divorce and you're just dividing assets, it's one thing. But when you have a child in common with someone, like you're with them, you're going to be a grandparent.
But let's go back to sex for a second.
Sure.
Because you're saying that you'd have to know that after a while that first period,
that luster,
when that sort of peters out. Gore Vidal, you know Gore Vidal,
sure.
He said one time that his relationship got better when they stopped having sex.
Interesting.
because there was no pressure anymore. I don't feel like doing it. I want it. I don't want it. I got a headache. You're annoying me. You smell of onions, whatever.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah. But I think having an honest conversation, because people, you know, we don't really have honest conversations about sex as a society.
No.
I mean, like, we're all wondering,
right.
like, well, how much sex is enough sex, and how much sex is a lot of sex, and how much sex am I having relative to other people? And you know, you can't really trust what anyone's saying about how much sex they have. So the truth is, like, when you look at your marriage or your relationship, if the baseline that you're using is when you first started dating or first started sleeping together, then you're always going to go down from there. I can't imagine it's going to go up. But the question is how far has it fallen? And then is it okay with both people that it went that way?
Listen, people are not robots. They don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
They don't know that the anger, for example, that you're not even in touch with the anger.
Yeah.
It's there and it's unconscious, and then you're really not interested in the person anymore. You don't want to have sex with that person. Forget when you have a fight.
Yeah.
What about this idea? Never go to bed angry.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
I do want to go to bed angry.
Well, sometimes it's better to go to bed angry
and then
you'll
wake up in
in
the morning, right?
cooler
Have
head.
coffee and then decide what you're going to do.
But see, that
in your
conversation
book,
while
you need to
fighting.
have a list of all these things that you want people to ask
That's what
each
the whole.
other.
That's the whole book.
Is that the
It's
book?
The whole book.
Well, let me just plug your book then.
Yeah.
How to Stay in Love by James Sexton. Pick it up.
Thank you. I hope you like it. I hope you like it. I think you will, because I think from what I saw in the play, I think we both have the same sentimental romantic streak, but also very pragmatic.
So you can pick up this book on Amazon.
Oh yeah, Amazon, or if you want to listen to me
books.
talk for 8.5 hours, it's on Audible or any of those other things.
Okay.
You know.
And so thanks, James, very much for coming
Thanks
on.
for having me, and thanks for the show. I really enjoyed it. I have
Okay.
to tell you.
I enjoyed it too. You can get tickets to My First Ex-Husband by going onto our website, The View's website, or myfirstexhusband.com. And thank you again, James Sexton.
Absolutely. Great to see you.
Have a great day out there too.